Well, hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Lee Osler, and I'm here with the fabulous Asea 5. This is April 9th, 21, just to date this, and we have a wonderful guest on tonight, Dr. Carolyn Hoffman. First, let's introduce our standards, our regulars, Jim and Ann Glenn from San Antonio. Give a wave to us.
Howdy.
Jim's our money guy, and he can talk business like nobody else, and Ann is our quintessential nutritionist who can speak to the nutrition like nobody else, it seems. Dr. Maureen Hayes from Galveston, Texas is also one of our regulars, and we love her. Again, my name's Dr. Osler. I am a dentist in the state of Washington. And tonight we have the fabulous, wonderful opportunity of having Dr. Carolyn Hoffman with us as our Asea 5 guest. And we're going to do something a little different. Often we talk about Asea Redox a lot, and tonight we want to also weave into this conversation the importance of nutrition. Dr. Hoffman is a naturopathic physician, so she has quite an edge over the rest of us because that's what they study. They study how the body works in a different way, and we love that, and especially what she can bring to the table. She, in her earlier years, as I understand it, she was a consummate athlete and dancer and using her body extraordinaire in ways that all of us just dream about. And now she is quite an expert in how the gut works and nutrition and all that. So Carolyn, let's turn it to you and you can fill in the blanks there. I'd like you to maybe just tell us what I didn't know, tell us what we don't know about you, and particularly to start off with, what is it that brought you to Asea and to what we're talking about? You know, how did this get started for you?
Yeah, well, interesting. Thanks very much for that. I felt like your screen had a touch of Parkinson's there. It's got a real shape. It's making me feel that you settled down now, so I guess it got connected. This is good. But thanks for that introduction. Yeah, and as you said, my background originally was totally different in terms of performance arts and teaching a large percentage as well around the world. But I ended up having a car accident that took me out of that, and the traditional medical arena said that there was nothing that they could do for that level of discomfort. That eventually, when I changed directions completely, as a result of somebody else showing me some alternative approaches to health that took this very allopathically minded person into a place that I hadn't been before, in terms of realizing that actually, wow, the body can do some things that I hadn't really expected. And once that happened, it kind of caught my attention. I was like, okay, if I can actually come out of what they said could never heal, and I could be better and re-engage my life and do some different things, the teaching side of me came out and was like, okay, people need to know about this. I wanted to help other people become empowered, and I think that's really kind of one of the important things, is to be an owner of our own health. And everybody that's here in Asea, and people I think who look to alternative approaches, outside of just traditional medicine, are probably wanting that, right? To be an owner of vibrance and health. And in that journey for me, it started in certain modalities, then moved into nutrition and homeopathy, and I'm just one of those eternal students. Give me something to learn on there. But in a way, it's because I look at it as a carpenter with a toolbox, right? Our goal is to find the root of the challenge when we're in alternative health and natural health approaches. And so for me, mine's traditional naturopathy. So I'm looking for the root of the problem, not the fruit of the problem. And I think drugs treat the fruit, the symptoms, those things that scream and yell at the body and try to get our attention because there's something going wrong underneath it. And in that journey of looking at options, I was shown Asea. I actually have to say, I had to be clear that I was shown it in 2011 and turned it down. And it circuited back into my life again in 2017. And I probably still would not necessarily have looked at it at that point if the gel technology hadn't come into play by then. And it was the gel technology that caught my interest. partly because my husband managed to engage in reopening an old athletic injury. And a lot of us who are in this, we would share the Asea, the Redox gel technology. And my sponsor, Dorothy, had given me a sample of it that I kind of put in my bag and wasn't really interested. I'll be really clear about that, even though that kind of was about the only thing that got me in the door. And after remembering I had it, I said to my husband, oh, you can be a guinea pig. I was told this stuff helps things that hurt. So I kind of rummaged in my bag and pulled out the instructions, the 3 times in 5 minutes that if people are not familiar with, we apply the gel 3 times in 5 minutes and wait 5 minutes. And we rate somebody's level of discomfort or kind of check, what's not moving in the body so that you've got a baseline and then watch what happens. And lo and behold, of course, what we all know is kind of expected, his discomfort changed considerably. So that piqued my interest. That got me to go and look at a presentation by Dr. David Silverman, who happened to be doing one in my hometown about a couple of weeks later. And so, the eternal student, okay, I want to go learn. That was it. I wasn't interested in the business. He will tell you clearly, I sat at the back of the room. I kind of dodged down in my seat and, folded my arms and I was like, you're not going to talk to me about the business. That wasn't on my horizon. But I listened to the science and I watched, I think more than anything, I watched people put gel on people time after time after time and watch those shifts that we see that seem kind of amazing if you're not familiar with this. But once you use this technology frequently, you really see what we know now, we come to know as being an expectation more than anything. And so I was like, okay, I can recognize as a benefit for the gel. And I went home and I got an account. You couldn't actually organize the account the way we can now. And so I ended up with some of the liquid that I did not want. I wanted the gel. I ordered as much of I was comfortable with the gel. And I ended up some of the liquid, put the liquid on the side, kind of wasn't certain what to do with it. But I did pay attention, I guess. Those of you who've seen Dr. David Silverman, those of you know, he will always say, while you're working on using the liquid and replenishing and working on what's going to happen for you and building your belief, waiting for your body to demonstrate what it's doing with those molecules, go put the gel on lots of people and watch what happens and build your belief. So I went ahead and I guess I was coachable. I went ahead and did that. So every person that came in my practice was like, I've got this new product, I want to try it out. Would you give me feedback? And we'd rate the discomfort and we put it on. And this was how I built my belief, because it was 100% of people had benefit from that in one shape or another. And that was kind of interesting. I wasn't certain what to do with our famous liquid. And I guess I was lucky that I gave it to my husband, and many people in our profession seem to have this same background. Well, I gave it to my husband to use, and I said, here, you drink it. I wasn't intending to order any more of the liquid. I didn't really need another product per se, but I knew that there was a lot of value to the gel technology because it's not analgesic. It's actually helping to open up communication in the cells and really get everything talking again and give it a chance to address the healing that didn't get finished, which is why we're in discomfort. And my husband had a shift in 2 weeks of using this with a long-term challenge with being able to exercise and breathe adequately. And it was so dramatic that it caught my attention. It was like, okay, why is this technology, this product, making this much difference in 2 weeks when we've worked on this challenge for 20 years and nothing else I'd ever used had created this shift? And so that to me said, okay, I got to understand what the heck is this? Because I actually wasn't really reading that much at that point, but then I started pulling out the books and then starting to get into more of the science stuff of it, part of it. And as I went through that journey, I then came across this eternal thought for me was, what if this is the missing link? And it went from there to I've 20 years in giving nutrition and homeopathy or whatever the tool is. What if this is the missing link that would kind of pull everything together, elevate the outcome and help people move to where they need to get to? And I'd had somebody referred to me that I wasn't yet seeing. She had had 3 encounters over different periods of time with tick-borne challenges in her life over a 30-year experience, had enormous challenges with that in every way that people do when they have those particular issues. And she didn't have a life. And as I read through this stuff, I was like, I wonder if this would make a difference. So it wasn't on experience, because I realized I'd only shared it with my husband, but on a hope and a hunch, I guess, I called her up and said, you might want to try this before you see me. This may be something that kind of moves you to where you need to get to. And so you have to realize it was such a stunner for me, because in 30 days, this woman had a 90% shift in the challenges that she suffered from for 30 years. And it was like, holy moly, what have I got my hands on here? Because I don't have anything. Still to this day, I will tell people that I have never yet worked with any single technology that can do what this does. So that was kind of my circuitous route into this.
That's so fascinating. And I think that similar discovery is true for all of us, where there's an element of doubt at first. I think it's born by ignorance in many respects. But all of a sudden, when you see or feel or experience a difference that you really can't explain away in any other mechanism, it's like it opens your mind, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, this is the challenge that we get, is because people see things change that we might deem as it seems too good to be true, it seems like a miracle, it seems like it shouldn't happen, or that doesn't seem possible. Because in the annals of traditional medicine, there's stuff that changes here that you don't see in traditional medicine. And so when you put those two comparisons together, I think people find it hard to accept that something that seems that innocuous could make this much shift. And I think it's really important to kind of do a perspective change on how we view that, because it's really important to realize that I don't think it matters whether we're giving somebody Asea or whether we're giving them some kind of nutrient and they get an outcome that's amazing. It's because you found the tool that supports the body to do what it didn't manage to finish on its own. And so, as we say with this, we're not here to diagnose, treat, and cure. We're doing something that is systemic. And I think that is what is so unique about this. We might use a nutrient that targets an adrenal fatigue, or we might use a nutrient that would target and support the thyroid, for example. But the thing I love about this is that we're doing systemic reboot, really. And I think it's very much like software and computers, right? We all know that software needs to keep getting updated, and the longer and the older the computer is, the more outdated it is. And we all know companies get to a point where they won't even service you anymore, and you have to get a whole new hardware system and all the rest of it. We're the hardware, our body is the hardware, right? But the system, we can't just say, oh, well, I'll ditch myself and replace myself at the age of 50 with a whole new body and I'll start all over again. We have to work with the hardware we've got. But I think where we're sitting here is that we're doing this complete systematic and systemic reboot of the system of every single cell of the body. And when you suddenly reboot and retune it, you get the capacity for the body to decide, now I've got the tools to go back and do the things that I haven't managed to do until this point. And so we see this kind of too good to be true stuff, because we're not working on specifics, we're working across the whole body. So we have the potential for anything to change.
So we've been doing a little discussion about root cause, the inner, I call it the inner doctor thing. Let's do a little bit of a pivot. We've been talking, and I appreciate that you brought up that this is not a diagnosis. These don't cure, these don't treat. We're not using this as medicine. We're simply using it as a way to, as you say, reset the body as a supplement. The signaling, whether it's gel form or liquid form, as you've described it, is playing at that level where that programming occurs. So something that you're intimately knowledgeable about is the whole arena of supplements. That is a different. When we say the redox signaling supplement, that is a new category, but we still need other types of supplements or other types of nutrition. Could you speak to how that plays into and works synergistically with everything that you've just addressed?
Yeah, I mean, it's the two sides of the coin, isn't it? And that's where I was thinking, you know, I have spent the 20 years playing in the materials, which is the supplementation. And I think we can think of supplementation even in the broader sense, right? We provide its fuel. It's fuel for the body. It's the thing that the mitochondria, which is where we're playing when we play with the redox piece, right? The mitochondria takes the nutrients that we supply it, and that could be just your diet, but it can also obviously be the way to increase the supply and support to the body when you're taking nutritional supplements. But it takes that and it provides it it turns it into creating this energy and fuel for the system. But the redox piece that, you know, we love to make clear for people is that that's the delivery, that's the laborers that are going to deal with and make use of the materials for the body. You know, once upon a time, we had the ability to be able to consume the right amount of foods and get the nutrients we needed. You know, that changed back in the 40s. Farming's altered. Nutrients aren't in the food, and now we're really in this arena where supplementation, in my opinion, is not an option. It might have been, might have been optional. It might have been special. People who were really kind of more cutting edge 20 years, 25 years ago were taking supplements at that point where maybe the average person wasn't. But supplements are a big conversation. Just as food quality is a big conversation, and we can think about that ourselves, right? There's a big difference between foods that are raised organically and the ones that are not. Ones will have more nutrients in than the other ones. Ones won't have, hopefully, pesticides and chemicals, although we can't eliminate that one entirely just because we live on planet Earth. You know, pesticides still fly around in the air, so even if you've got an organic plot next to a non-organic plot, unfortunately, you're still going to end up with some of that in the food supply. But one of the things that people don't really understand is that standardization of the way in which we manufacture nutrients and supplements, nutritional supplements, is very loosely guided. And I'm sure some of you have probably had people say, oh, I never really know why they do this. You know, they might pull a product and say to you, if you're sharing something, well, is it FDA approved? And this thing feels like a gold standard for a lot of people when they don't realize that the FDA only approve drugs. They don't actually approve supplements at all. They give very loose guidelines. And those guidelines are that 60% of what is on a label in a bottle is in that bottle. It doesn't guarantee that it's in every single supplement at all. There's no standardization in how it's manufactured. So you're relying upon the company to have ethics and put money behind that manufacturing. And so cheap products will not have that. And you are going to pay more for good quality products. Having said that, just because we have good products, if you can establish and you know that you found a company that manufactures to good manufacturing processes, GMP is a kind of a guideline of standardization, it still doesn't mean that that product is right for you or it's going to be deliverable to you. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it works well with other products. There's lots of science out there that shows that you can have two antioxidant supplements. If you take them both, they actually work against each other. They are pro-oxidative. And so people think that because they're taking this antioxidant and that one, and then the other one, that they're doing a lot of good because maybe they've read about things, but actually they could be creating more challenges. So I was just really excited because Asea recognized that we need materials to complement this delivery, this system with the redox. And then they spent a lot of time looking at all of the things, the elements that make good nutrition. First off, you know, organic foods, whole foods, not just, well, I'll go down the road and buy the local organic stuff, but you know, where's it grown? Because the soil source makes a difference to the quality of the food source that you're using for your supplements. So sourcing out around the world, the best places to go and get those ingredients is also a higher level of manufacturing and integrity. That's one part of what they have. making sure that it is GMO free, making sure that it can be well prepared and manufactured and meets all of those same criteria as FDA standards for drugs. And so when we get a GMP product, such as the Asea products, what we know is that instead of having 60% of what's on the label as the only guarantee inside that bottle, we move to 98 to 101% is actually in every single capsule. So in other words, when you're spending money, you actually get what you're spending your money on, as opposed to hopefully having something in that bottle that it talks about. And we know that there's lots of variation in that. Then they went this other level. What works synergistically with the redox, right? So we have this amazing cellular connection between elevating what happens in the cells and then also how we use the material that builds it. So this is building our house. And they've been very strategic about what they put. I love that we don't overload the whole line here. You know, we have this amazing multi-nutrient product in terms of the source. And this one, for me, was exciting because being an enzyme specialist, I was like, nothing goes down without enzymes in. So, and what are they? They're the workers, they're the material workers that make sure that we can absorb vitamins and minerals. You know, you can take as many vitamins and minerals as you want, but if you're deficient in enzymes, it isn't going to get delivered. It's not going to be usable. This is a whole chain of synergy that has to be in there together. So they've been really smart in what they put together with that. So this is a really great one in order to really nourish every aspect of what we need and what's not in our diet. We have obviously other ones, but maybe we want to kind of focus on some other aspect that you want to talk about.
I'd point you in the direction of kind of to the gut, you know, this bioavailability, the nutritional, the probiotic, how the gut health, the leaky gut. Could you address that?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'd started talking about gut-brain health probably about 15, 16 years ago before it became a popular thing as it has more in the last 10 years. And I know that a lot of people talk about the gut is the second brain. In my opinion, it's the first brain. Because it's feeding information to the brain all the time and the brain is responding as a result of that. Gut integrity is where everything begins, right? It causes, how many times when you feel nauseated, right? How come the whole of your body feels lousy? It's because it affects everything going on. I mean, it really is just such a powerful place. And when we absorb food, there's lots of hurdles that can cause challenges. So you might be eating, but it doesn't mean that you're absorbing what you need from that nutrition. So that's another reason why I love the enzymes that are in the source, because it's going to help that deliverability of it. But it is also the way that Asea has looked at the quality of the material. In other words, can you break down and assimilate and deliver those materials to the tissue? And so that is an important piece of it. But as you mentioned, probiotics play a piece in there because they really reflect and support the immune system. But I think it's really important to remember that our immune system, 80% of our immune system is along the gut. And people don't really realize that. In fact, it's actually only one cell wide. It's the protection between being in and out of the body. And that's really amazingly fragile, considering it's such an important piece of what goes on for us. So if you have gut challenges, right, you're going to have brain challenges automatically. Leaky gut, leaky brain, they go together. I mean, there is just no getting away from it. So inflammation, as we know, is going to be integral to disrupting the integrity of that gut. And so if we think of pictures for me, I guess because I'm British, I have these pictures of these old-fashioned medieval castles when I think about the lining and the protection within the gut. So basically, if we think of fingers as being like the soldiers of the immune system, they should be tight all the way along the gut. They should be sitting side by side as a protection between what comes in and what goes into the body, because we're like a donut, really. It's a hole from top to bottom. And when things pass through, they're not actually in the body until they've been absorbed. But that should be tight. And those junctions that run all the way through the body begin to get broken down because of inflammation. And when we get that break, stuff starts to go through and go places it shouldn't. And so people get allergies, and it'll start with one food and then it'll be something else. And, they're always wondering why they can never control it. But also what you talked about, the importance of our probiotic. And the one reason I really love this is because the gut is so integral to your immune system. And there's lots of probiotics on the market. Many of them love to tout what we call large numbers of colony forming units. So if people look on labels, they'll see CFUs. That's what that stands for. The challenge with that is it's like sometimes bringing in a battalion against a challenge, right? You can cause all sorts of disruption. And for some people, that really causes challenges in their stomach because it's just too much. It's an overload. What I think is more important is that we've been smart enough to have 11 different species of probiotics in there. And those things make an enormous number of connections to cognitive function, to cardiovascular function, to immune system, to eye health. I mean, it goes on and on. I did a chart one day. I spent some time kind of analyzing. In fact, actually, I'm going to take just a second, if I can, just to read, for example, and I'm not promoting here that we're saying this is what our probiotic does. I want people just to understand that, for example, if you have a product with things like Bifidobacterium infantis, that one is found in breast milk, right? That actually shows the studies will support things like IBS. So that inflammatory challenge with the gut, we have different ones that in there that support things like the bacterial disruption that people get that often causes issues with them because they're out of whack in their system. Lung infections, we support the gut health in keeping mobility going. So brain health, what we call natural killer cells. I mean, all of these probiotics support fundamental ways in which our body defends itself. And so we have these two things, these amazingly complex but well constructed things that work with the redox and that actually are assimilated. In other words, what you're taking in is what you're going to get in the body, and you're really going to maximize the use of that product.
It's amazing, Carolyn. I was reading, watching a video early one morning on somebody talking about healing the gut in order to lose weight and change your metabolism and all. I thought, how interesting. That's one of the things that I struggle with. I'm very healthy, but I'm fluffy, and it doesn't seem to matter what I do. And I do take the biome. I'm probably not as consistent as I should have been, but I'm watching this, and it turned out that they were talking about the 7 miracle microbes. This is interesting. So I watched the whole thing, and it was very compelling, and it was very expensive. I think it was like $300 to get, a couple of months worth of the products. And I was like, I wonder if we have any of those miracle microbes in our biome. Well, we have 6 of the 7 miracle microbes plus a whole bunch more. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just need to take my own product on a regular basis. So I have been quite more consistent with it for that reason, because as you said, the gut is everything. And
right.
Jim,
and it's not $300.
And it's not $300, no. And it's such an easy thing. It doesn't cause any bloating or gas or distension,
no.
Which is a reason why a lot of people don't like to take probiotics. Plus, it has the prebiotics in it that feed the bacteria, and the slippery elm that helps to keep it in the gut.
There. Yeah.
So
right.
fabulous product. And Jim, if I'm not mistaken, it's when you added this and got consistent with the nutrition that you started really seeing a change in your weight. And
yeah, that's what I think it was.
Yeah, all 4 of them combined with the redox, since they work together, it did play a part in his 69 pounds lost. So so I was going to comment. I've been thinking about this since Dr. Hershowitz last was on, and he made a quick comment at the end, I believe. He said, people, they go to sleep at night. They wonder why they didn't have such a settled sleep. And it might have been what they had for dinner. We don't think about, Jim sometimes says, people have Carpenter's syndrome. They keep hitting the hammer on the same thing that they're struggling with. And why don't they just, stop? And if you think about the different habits. I'm not going to name any, related to either the lungs or to the liver. And I'm thinking about somebody particular with inflammation, which so many times, is going on, but they choose to maybe consume an over amount of bell peppers. Well, that's just going to aggravate your condition. And Asea is not like this magic potion. Poof, you do all these habits and you expect it to all erase, and you may have had an unsettled sleep because maybe you had too much beef, or maybe you ate too close to bedtime, or maybe you had one too many of some kind of adult beverage, and you wonder why you're not having such optimal health. Because Dr. Ward said, if you combine Redox with the right amount of water, the right amount of activity every week, and right amount of your nutrition, your sleep, all those things work together. But if you really want this to work, you need to think about some of the things that might be aggravating your inflammation. Maybe you don't need to be grabbing Oreo cookies, because that will notoriously aggravate whatever you've got going on inside you. It just, it kind of behooves me that people that want to get the optimal health, they still have the same stuff, the very things they shouldn't consume. You're supposed to only have so much salt, so much sugar a day, but then you just keep feeding your brain, and then your brain gets triggered. Oh, I want more of that. And I wish just people would think about, like, water. You might think you're hungry, but really you're thirsty, because your hypothalamus, the mechanism of your brain, is saying, just grab some water and wait 10 minutes, and maybe you weren't so hungry. So maybe you could talk about that. And I did want to plug you. I wanted to plug you real quick. I love your article, Carolyn's Conversations. You're an expert on enzymes, and I love it. I read it. I should pass it on to other people. So thank you very much.
No, I mean, you make some really good points. I mean, people don't realize that. I think a lot, it's really interesting how people come to something, and let's say it is the Asea. They come to something and they think that they take that and they don't have to change anything that caused the issue in the first place. I'm sorry, but as a naturopath, we're not into the drug piece, but we're looking at what creates good health. And when you don't do that, what is causing ill health? I mean, it's ease, right? Health is ease, and non-health is dis-ease. I mean, that's the side of what we're going through. And as a naturopath, we look at how do you support this body to exist in a state of ease, right? Well, first off, you need sunshine, and there's a reason why we need that, right? You need good water, you need good food, you need good sleep, you need good exercise. I mean, those are foundational. And if you do that, then you're giving yourself a good platform. But you can't just take something. It's this Band-Aid mentality. Well, I can take that and it'll stop this, but I can still keep living. No, you can't. It's really interesting to me, because medicine is now coming up with, I've had to do a number of CEUs in this last couple of weeks, and they actually started talking about this state of inflammation that now is a category called inflammaging.
Wow. Yeah.
In other words, we are all in a constant state of continuous low-level inflammation. Now, we think we're talking inflammation, where you're taking sugar, or whatever, you're doing something that's aggravating your inflammation, as though that's a kind of isolated thing. It isn't. It's like this low-level systemic, ongoing, permanent inflammation that everybody is living in, that is promoting why we are so unhealthy as a community. But you can't stick a band. I mean, I think it's that Band-Aid mentality, right? The same as the drug piece. I mean, we still got to come back to the alarm. I always say to people, when they're like this, do you have a smoke alarm at home? Well, they might say yes, and I say, okay, so tell me, in the middle of the night, the smoke alarm goes off, what do you do? Or I said, I'll go and look for the fire. Great. I said, would you go and just turn off the alarm because it's annoying you and go back to bed? No. And I said, well, that's what you're doing with the drug. The symptom is the fire alarm. It's that smoke alarm going off. but there's a fire that created it, and that didn't suddenly just rush into place in a second or two. It started smoldering somewhere. Something was out of balance. It was a little bit of smoke to begin with. Hello, redox, right? It's a little bit of smoke because it's the signal that there's a problem that needs to pull the immune system, the antioxidants in there to heal, to get the body to heal it. And why do we have excess inflammation? Because the little bit of smoke didn't get resolved, and that little bit of smoke kept promoting and it didn't get resolved. And so it goes up because the response piece isn't taking place. But you're right, you know, and it may be stress. What happened if they had a really stressful day, right? And maybe that was the reason that they didn't sleep, because they were in hyperdrive all day and their body never got to kick into being in the repair and restore mechanism. Maybe they needed some more supply of redox that day. It's not a perfect thing. I mean, the body's so complex, and I think a lot of times people think that it's simple. You know, we just do this and we can solve that. It's a moving target in a way. It's a very complicated process, and it's not always as simple as people would like it to be. But this to me is foundational, because we're not going to survive if we don't have it. And why wouldn't you want to rebuild something that's essential to you functioning at a more optimal level? You know, and we watch the outcome as a result of it.
Exactly.
Okay, real quick. I know I can tell Maureen's getting ready to talk.
Yeah.
Sorry, Princess. We've seen so many people have radical things happen to their body, correct, with redox.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't change anything else.
No.
And they had phenomenal results, correct? Like I
Yes.
did.
Mm-hmm.
Then we come out with the nutraceuticals and things started getting better.
Right.
It's not that you need the whole, I mean, it's great if you can do the whole package, but I don't want to give people the, well, gosh, now I got to do everything. It's great if you could, but I just want to make sure that people understand that redox is the foundation to all health.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Russell Mariani, who's going to be our guest in a couple of weeks, it's the foundation. But if you can start working on everything else, can you imagine what kind of life we could live?
Yeah, and you know, the other side of it is, I mean, I came from, you know, well, we'll give a nutritional supplement for this and we'll give a nutritional supplement for that. And I would have people come in when they wanted to work out why they weren't getting where they wanted to with all these things they were already doing, that, you know, they weren't coming from me, but they came to me with these things. And truly, they would sometimes come in with 2 or 3 plastic carrier bags full of supplements, and we would go through testing, first off testing which ones were compatible with their body, right, and then working out what did they actually need, because I think people don't really realize that your lymphatic system, if it's not mobilized, so like you're talking about, you need good water, right? If you're not exercising and you're not drinking good water, you've got a static lymphatic system. What does that mean? That's like taking the garbage out, right? That's the Underground Railroad train that's taking out the junk from the system, but it also delivers the nutrients. So it delivers good vitamins to the blood system, and it cleans out and transports the junk out. When we're static, when we sit on Zoom calls all day long, right, and when we don't drink enough and we don't get up and pump, because moving the muscle is the only way that you move the lymph, and deep breathing, those things, it becomes gelatinous. Now I picture like, you know, the waste pipes underground taking away things, right? Gelatinous glue, all right, jelly, and we're putting good vitamins on top of that. And all they're doing is sticking to this gelatinous stuff. They're not getting delivered into the tissue. So here's an example when people take lots of things, but they don't feel better. Maybe it's the lymphatic system that we need to mobilize. Right? Because if we can't deliver what gets stuck in the system. And when you do that, you can create a lot more toxicity by keep on taking more and more supplements that just aren't being used. And what I've seen is that when we added the redox, let's suppose people were on, you know, some supplements, they might not have been the ones that I was giving them. But what I saw was, even with non-Asea supplements that weren't out when I started using them, it increased the absorption of those supplements. They got a better outcome of those supplements. Now, transfer and switch them over and put in place the ones that are designed to work with the redox, and you elevate. And I think this is why we do see bigger jumps than I would necessarily expect when people add nutrition in, and that we hear these stories like, I've suddenly, my levels of health have elevated greatly again, right? But we do have to have both those pieces. And can see people are kind of asking questions in the chat by things like, you know, when to take some of the supplements. I always have a phrase that they work better in you than in the bottle.
Yeah.
Any of it does. So you know, there are guidelines, but I will tell you, please don't get yourself in a twist over guidelines, because if that means that you don't take them, that's of no benefit to you at all.
Right.
So find a way that works first and foremost with your lifestyle. This really should be when you eat, because it has enzymes in there. It's going to help you break down the food you're consuming and deliver everything together. So I kind of would like sometimes to piggyback off that with the Life Max, because if you've got extra enzymes going in when you're eating, this can also benefit from that. So this is our lifestyle energy formula that I love, and really helps the brain and the eyes and the cardiovascular health as well. But, you know, sometimes people will take that on its own. You can take it on its own. That's fine. I think that's really great in the mornings, because it does support the kind of vitality throughout the daytime. You wouldn't want to take that and then try to go to bed. But you might also want it if you've got to pull a late night and you need more energy and more mental focus. That can support. The probiotic, you know, people vary in that use. I mean, there are guidelines on this. And I forget what it says.
3 at the bedtime.
Yeah,
3 at bedtime.
Yes, for some people that doesn't always work, and for some people they prefer to take it, you know, in the morning on an empty stomach is a great way to do it either way. There's a lot of a reason, I think, to take it at nighttime, because it stays in the system at the time when your body needs support for restoration, and so I think that's a good one. The omegas. Just because of my understanding of enzymes and the way that we handle fat-soluble foods and fat foods, and how the body degreases them when it comes out of the stomach, I prefer people to take omegas on an empty stomach. And the reason I say that is because if you don't have a very good gallbladder system, which is what degreases your food, then if you take a supplement with lots of oil in it, you're coating all the food that you're eating with that oil. Now you've got a compromised gallbladder, and it can't degrease the food. If you can't degrease the food, the next stage of the pancreatic enzymes can't work. So you get inadequate digestion, and therefore you start getting all the challenges with undigested proteins. They get caught in the little gut line, you know, the villi down the gut, and then we get other problems. So I always say to people, take those on an empty stomach if you can. I think they're also good at night, actually, supporting them. And, you know, there's labeling. Can I just make a statement that labeling and the way any company is allowed to label is really only more about the amount of the nutrient that avoids the disease that would occur if we didn't have sufficient of that nutrient. That's the RDA stuff, right? The amount that they tell you is the recommended daily amount is literally enough to make you avoid the disease that would come if you didn't have that nutrient. So like scurvy and vitamin C, the minimum amount is to make sure you don't get scurvy. You will never see a therapeutic amount on a label. It is baseline to support general support of the body. If you have a health challenge, and because of doing so much work in the fields of, you know, unregulated cell multiplication, shall we put it that way, you know, our dosing amounts for therapeutic dosing of nutrition is much higher. Right, because you need much higher levels of those nutrients if you're pushing a challenge than you do to just support general health. They're very different.
Can you give us much more?
You know, it's not even so much about sickness. Here's a great, interesting one just on omegas, right? Because of the amount of omega-6s, and if people are not familiar with 3, 6s and 9s, you know, and then this has 7s, which is unusual, and the 5s and the 7s, but 3, 6s and 9s are the common thing. 3s and 6 the body will use to convert to 9s. But 6s are innately in food, but they are massively in processed foods. And so the quantity of omega-6s that we as humanity, especially in first world countries, are consuming is way in excess of what we need, and promotes the inflammation and all these inflammatory challenges. And so we need to offset that with the 3s to counteract the amounts of 6s. Now, the quantity ratios years ago are nowhere near what they are. Nowadays, they're much, much larger. And so I think when I was rechecking some stuff, because there's lots of studies on very high doses of omegas in terms of brain protection against before injury and brain recovery after injury that they did at Harvard for footballers. They were looking at brain studies and looking at omegas. And so in general, you've got something like a 16-to-1 ratio in terms of 6s and 3s. And when I did some calculations on looking at kind of an average diet consumption of what you might be intaking on a 6, I put my family on 4 bottles a month.
Each person?
Yeah.
Wow. And it's anti-inflammatory too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, massively supports brain health. I knew years ago when I was kind of into 3s, probably about 20 years ago, that the Japanese were very into feeding their kids very high doses of 3s because it improved kind of brain performance and outcome for testing and stuff like that. So much higher levels to support, cognitive health and just offsetting the 6s. So, if you're doing a 3 a day, that's kind of foundational, but you definitely can increase that. I happen to have done all the studies on the brain stuff just at the time when my daughter decided to descend down a staircase at Virginia Tech and hit her head on concrete.
Oh, no.
Had a massive concussion, and she had called me on the what should I do? I said, go to the hospital. You need to get to the ER. But meantime, I was already saying, okay, you need this amount of omega, we need this and this and this, and I put her immediately on 4 bottles a month. But we did like 4 bottles, I think, in about 2 weeks, really high levels of them. And she got into the ER and they were kind of saying, well, you need to do this. She said, oh yeah, my mum's already told me I need to do this, this, and this. But it was fascinating. And I used the Asea Omega light and day, like 2 weeks, boom, out of that, I'm able to go back to studying, and just astonishingly fast recovery stuff that kind of played out what we saw. So I know that the Harvard studies all show that high dosing before they had brain injury in competition, and then high dosing after they had it took their brain back to like pre-injury time status.
Is that also for memory issues?
Yeah, yeah. Memory.
Obviously.
I mean, the brain is largely fat.
Are you calling me a fat brain?
That would be a compliment, right?
Okay, well, let me ask you a question, because source is whole food, right?
Mhm.
So you should be able to take more than the recommended amount of this too, without any.
Yeah, when you have organic, well, not necessarily organic, well, yes, no, sorry. I mean, nix that one. When you have organic whole food supplements, you can take more than what is on the label. Remember, the labeling is about the minimum amount of the source supplied to just kind of infill things. It's not really about elevating your health massively. So you definitely can, because that's the whole point about what's important to use whole foods, because you need to have something the body knows how to handle. When you've got synthetic vitamins, the body doesn't know how to handle those, and you're stressing the system. So I always say to people, think of the nutrients within your tissue as being like your pantry in your kitchen. All right, you use a fake vitamin, the body looks at it and goes, what? Well, I got to do something with that, and it tries to use it, but now it pulls from your tissue the cofactors necessary to try to convert this synthetic into something that it tries to use. So it's like pulling out of the pantry all the time, and you can really create a depletion within your tissue of the necessary requirements. and then it still can't really use it because we're not designed to eat something that isn't food. We're not designed to eat a chemical replica of a vitamin, which should come from food. And so that speaks to what Lee was talking about bioavailability. You can take all these fake things up the wazoo, but they don't end up getting in your tissue, and they cause depletion, other nutrient depletion. And if they dissolve, that's a whole different topic in itself. I mean, and people who would clean out cesspools years ago would tell you who bought the synthetic vitamins, because they'd all be out in the garden in the cesspool completely whole. They wouldn't have even dissolved. So
Yeah, you can read the brand on them.
Yeah, right. So
well, and the reason why people need something like Source is, I mean, if you really scrutinize the traditional Western diet, they are lacking the right amount of enzymes, superfoods, micronutrients, the right amount of oils. So Source, all four of the line are so much simpler than all that stuff that's out there, where people, like you said, walked in with a bag of supplements that weren't absorbing. Here you have 4 products that can give you what you need. Yeah, it'd be great if people were eating the right amount of fruit and vegetables, but likely they aren't, or they don't grab those as their snack. And so here they can, double up if they need to. And I love how our Source, when we sourced for the omega, that they picked wild Alaskan cod, and they made sure there was no fishy aftertaste, and children could consume it, and they can even chew it. I don't know if you've ever tried chewing it, but it's not like the traditional, horse pill type. These small capsules or gels are easy to just pop right in. So, I mean, I can't say
and it's manufactured on site as they as they fish it. So that's something. Somebody was asking about the fish piece. The other thing you can do is break it into applesauce. I mean, I've got kind of 83 or 4-year-old clients who can't swallow some of these things. So we make a cocktail. We put it all in their Life Max and everything, mix it up. Just do anything that makes it usable. I'm just a great person that like to find a way around this. Solve the problem and get it to work. So I'm just looking at difficulty swallowing pills. Yes, and the Renew 28, definitely great for lymphatics. I would recommend every woman use it as their deodorant, because you're also going to mobilize the circulation. We didn't talk about the fact it gives a 55% increase in microcirculation that actually continues over the 4-day period. So for me, it's always used under, the axillary areas for the lymphatics. I use it in the groin as well. I mean, so it's an all over body therapy, but I'm always putting it along all of the pathways of the lymphatic flow pathway.
Yeah, I love a lymphatic flush, right before bed. And there's a diagram out there. We can put it on United. That's great for every one of those areas you're talking about. And then some. You can use the Renew 28, and it's just amazing what it does for head to toe.
Okay, real quick, we haven't done this yet. We've got 5 minutes. We have the Aussies coming up here shortly.
Yeah.
Can you just explain what redox molecules are?
All right, so they are the communication system for our body. They're made in the mitochondria. We don't want to get too technical here, but as part of the ATP, in other words, the production of energy as the body burns the fuel that we provide it, the sugar and the oxygen, we produce these signaling messengers. They also move energy around. They're the delivery system. And as a result of it, they help the signaling and the communication within the cells, between the cells. And we also now know from studies, they help make sure that we keep the way our genes signal at an optimal point. And those genes signaling, what is gene signaling? It's the communication of the blueprint of the body. All right, how do we develop the blueprint of the body? And we have these innately in our body. If you think of them as a glass, they're like a full glass when we're born. And really when we hit puberty, it's like 1% per year, it keeps going down. So it's like drinking from that glass once you're 15 and beyond. So about every decade, we're losing 10% of them. And what we have becomes less efficient. Let's be very clear. If we didn't have redox, we'd all be face planting in a few minutes, right? We wouldn't be having this conversation. But you, me, the pets and the plants, this is the thing that keeps us alive. And what we are in as a field, it's not supplementation, Lee, because it's replenishment, right? We're rebuilding something that is native to the body that you, me, and everybody is making in order to be alive, for our body to do anything. And it's our way to be able to rebuild something that we're losing year by year by year. That would include stem cells. That's the same field, replenishment. In other words, putting something back in the body that your body is natively making, that you can't be allergic to, and you just have less of with age. The great thing about the studies on the Asea Redox is that we know that it's non-toxic. You can drink as much of it as you want to. You can't be allergic to it, as I said, we're all making them, and this is literally identical. And great thing is also, this is the only thing I know, that there is no drug interaction. So it's safe for everyone, whether you're a newborn to, the other end of the spectrum. It can help and support everybody. I spoke to somebody yesterday who looked at my stuff, and they walked into my office to talk about this, having looked at some stuff I'd sent them, and they said, this stuff's a miracle. They said, this is just like systemic rebuild. They said, in fact, everybody needs this, don't they? And it was like, hallelujah, you got this completely.
Okay, 1 minute. Did it shock you that it's being brought to us by network marketing?
It didn't shock me, because I'm familiar with the fact that, if you want cutting edge stuff that's going to be out there before the doctors get it 20 years ahead of time, that's where you're going to find it, right? It just is the way it is. It's not going to come through mainstream medicine. It might end up in mainstream medicine, whatever it is. But this has a uniqueness about this industry because of the way that they came to it. This was, as we know, going to go the pharmaceutical route, and they turned that down and turned down a huge amount of money to keep this out in the arena of the commercial application for us to be able to become an owner in our health and help ourselves on a daily basis, So I think it's challenging for some people, because if they're very scientific, they always go, well, why did they take it through network marketing? But they don't really understand that, especially in the nutritional industry, because we're not in drugs. Right? We're not in a drug, so you don't get, the FDA isn't involved in nutrition. They're not approving it because there aren't the side effects that they have to approve drugs, because they can kill you. They can certainly overdose you. We don't have these challenges with where we're at. And so it's a different arena, and it's a story, because it's something that was never done before, because they've created a category that never existed. You can't put this on a shelf. Nobody understands this. It has to be explained, and it can be best explained and supported person to person, because it's not cookie cutter. Everyone's going to have a uniquely different experience, and that's where the person that can help you from their experience find out how to maneuver and support you in getting the best outcome that you can for your health.
I love that.
Wow.
That's a great summary, Carolyn.
Yeah, I loved what you said, owner of our health. You have to be an owner of your health. If you don't care about your health, bye. If you care about your health, join us every Friday right here. Carolyn, this was awesome. It's really, we had a request to have you back every once a month. So I do want to announce that next week will be the business of Asea. And I want to point out that if it was not through next level marketing, we wouldn't be talking about this. It wouldn't even be here. So next week, we've got Dr. David Silverman, we've got Gina Moran, and we've got Danielle Matthews. If you want to hear some amazing, life-changing health issues turning into financial blessings, please come back and join us next Friday at the same time. Carolyn, thank you. You're awesome.
welcome.
Carolyn.
Dr. Lee, thank you. Dr. Maureen, you're awesome. You're the best.
Thanks, y'all.
And yes,
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
we'll get back to your the person that invited you to the call, and we'll make sure that you all get it. So thank you, guys. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Carolyn.
You're welcome. Bye. Good to see you.
Bye.